and living in France. My name's Karen Tate. I'll be your host for the next hour. For the past 20 or so years, I've been the editor of French Property News magazine in the UK. And as a freelance journalist, I also contribute to titles in the UK, such as the Sunday Times. I'm joined today by our expert panel who are waiting to answer your questions. I'll pass over to them first so they can introduce themselves, and then we'll get started on the questions. So over to you, Joanna.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. For the first time ever, we're actually all in the same room, most of us, with the France Relocation Alliance group that we've been making a video on today. So we're here to help you with any questions. I'm Joanna Legget. I'm part of the Legget family. We've been in business since 1998. We cover the whole of France, and we've got agents all over France, so we can help you with any property related questions. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Joanna. And Tracy?
Hi everybody, my name is Tracy Leonetti. I'm a relocation expert based in the south of France for the past 35 years. It's my job and the team of LBS to help you who are looking to move, live or create a business in France, and we help you by helping with all the different processes you need, visas and healthcare, driving licenses, car registrations and all of those things in between.
Lovely, thanks Tracy. And Sharon?
Hi everybody, I'm Sharon Revolt. I'm a French mortgage broker at CAFPI International. I head up the international team and have been helping non-resident and expat buyers obtain French property finance since 2003.
Thanks, Sharon. And Paulette?
Hi everyone, my name is Paulette Booth. I'm the director and co-founder of Agence AXA International and also the director of L'Onomie, which is a health insurance visa specialist company. My whole team are English speakers and we're there to help you with all of your insurance and banking needs in France.
Fantastic. And Amanda?
Well, thank you, Karen. My name is Amanda Johnson. I am a partner at the Spectrum IFA Group here in France. We are an international financial advisory firm. I'm here to answer any questions on tax, investments, pensions. And if I don't know the answer, one of the team here will. So thank you.
Great. And finally, Jonathan.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name's Jonathan Watson. I'm a senior trader here at Lumon. Lumon is a specialist money transfer organisation. We specialise in moving money all over the world for clients buying property. We've got a real speciality in France. I'm very interested in France myself. I try and get over there whenever I can for a ski holiday, or if I'm lucky enough, somewhere maybe in the south of France or Brittany, somewhere by the beach. So one of the things we like to do in these webinars is to find out a little bit more about you, our audience, just to understand when you might be planning to look at property over in France. As many of you are aware, this won't be something that happens overnight. It can be a long process from the sort of very start to finish in terms of starting to look. So it's good for us to understand where you might be in that process. And a lot of people looking at the moment, which is quite interesting from my point of view, the currency side of things with euro rates being quite attractive at the moment. So that's really good to see. Thank you everyone who has answered that question. And the next question for you in the polls will be when you might financially be ready to put forward an offer. When we're talking about the currency and payment side of things, there's actually a few different options that are available to fix and lock in rates. There's been a lot of volatility in the currency markets already so far this year, which has so far gone buying euros way, but as we'll see, things can and do change. So having an understanding where you might be in that process will be very helpful for us to explain the most relevant options this evening. And then the final poll, where are you joining us from today? Wherever you are in the world, the buying process in France remains the same, but there can be slight nuances depending on where you're from, of course, with currency, international banking regulations and other matters. So looks like a lot of our audience from the UK. We've got a lot of coverage there for you. but also people join us from America as well, which we're seeing a lot of, and the dollar is quite strong against the euro at the moment, so that's interesting to see. And then a lot of people from wider Europe as well. So thank you everyone who's answered those polls, and I'll pass back to Karen.
Thanks, Jonathan. So let's get started on the questions. There's a buying one here for Joanna. The question is, I've had some bad experiences buying property in the UK. I've basically been gazumped and lost out on a property I had my heart set on, but I've heard the French system is different and protects you against this. Is that right?
Yes, it's a totally different system in France, and gazumping is really practically unheard of. That's the reason for that is the way the buying process happens. So when you find a property that you love and you make an offer on it and the offer is accepted, the contracts are drawn up, which is called the compromis de vente, and they're drawn up within a few days of the offer being made if all the paperwork is together. So that means you exchange contracts right at the beginning. And I know in the UK, sometimes you can exchange and complete on the same day, which does mean that there's no contract signed right up until completion. And that's why gazumping could happen. But in France, the way it happens is once you've signed the compromis and the seller, the vendor has signed the compromis, the seller can't pull out, he's then tied in. The buyer still has suspensive clauses if he was looking for planning permission for to change a barn into habitation or a swimming pool or something like that. If those suspensive clauses or a mortgage, for example, aren't met, he can still withdraw from the sale, but the vendor can't. So the minute that compromis de vente is signed, you're pretty safe. It's the buyer's protected, the vendor is locked into that contract, and it generally goes through. So gazumping is pretty much not heard of in France, which is great.
That is great. That's really good news, I'm sure, for everyone listening in. So a question for Tracy now. I've been dreaming of retiring to France for years, but a friend told me it's practically impossible to do this since Brexit. I know it's more difficult these days, but I thought visas were available. Surely other non-EU people move to France too. So hopefully you can reassure them too, Tracy.
Yeah, that is an absolutely fabulous question. So first of all, the key thing there is my friend told me, though I would seriously advise everybody who's listening to this, if your friend, your neighbour, or your family member tells you you can or can't do something about moving to France, then it's generally speaking based on their experience, so not necessarily the best experience. So yeah, and that's not good advice. Of course, it is more complicated to move to France since Brexit, absolutely, because of course you need to have a visa if you wish to move to France permanently, but it is absolutely doable. Of course, you can move to France. You can get a visa to move to France if you want to spend more than 90 days out of 180. And which type of visa you would need would depend on what your project is, of course. It could be that you want to move to France as a retiree, you don't want to work. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be of a retirement age, but you're not going to work, so you get a long stay visitor's visa, and then you become a resident of France, or of course a business visa for those that might have business projects. Of course, we've been working with non-EU passport holders for over 15 years now, so there's many thousands of people who've moved to France. So Brexit has made it more complicated for you. Yes, it has, but it is absolutely still doable.
Thanks, Tracy. As you say, lots of other non-EU people have moved to France over the past however many years, so they've sort of trod the path already for Brits who are now getting used to the process, and with people like you on hand to help, it's
absolutely
certainly doable, isn't it?
Yeah.
If not really easy. Okay, we've got a question for Sharon now. It's a financial question. It says, I've received an inheritance and I'm going to spend it on a French property. Although I'll have the cash, are there any advantages to using a French mortgage instead?
Excuse me, sorry, thank you, Karen, for the question. In France, once you put your money into a property, you can't then release equity in the future. So if you have the cash to buy the property, there are two possibilities for you. You could either keep your cash and put it in an investment. Speak to somebody here like Amanda, who can help yield, basically use your money as leverage and get a mortgage and put your money in an investment, and hopefully, well, that's Amanda's job, but she'll get you a better yield. Interest rates are quite low in France. So if you can get a mortgage with 3 or 4% and have a return on your investment, you're also protecting your revenue stream from your investment and paying off the mortgage over the years. Mortgages here come with life insurance. So if anything happens to you, i.e. you pass away, you're actually leaving something and not touching your investment because your mortgage is paid off and you still have your money from your investment. Where if you'd purchased of your inheritance money, you wouldn't have that money. You'd still have the property, but maybe the people who were left behind don't want to sell the property to gain access to the money. You also can't get an equity release, as I said earlier, in France. So if you buy the property cash, but maybe your plans change in a couple of years' time and you want to withdraw the equity from the property, if you don't meet certain criteria, you might not be able to get the money out, or you might only be able to get out like 30%. So I always advise it's better, but then again, I'm a mortgage broker, but I'm just giving you the reasons why, to use the leverage and benefit from low interest rates, which are the case at the moment in France. If you wish to pay off the mortgage later on, maybe totally or partially, give yourself that space to decide and make those financial decisions when you have all of the elements necessary. Because once you've done it, the only real way to get the money out again is to sell the property. So I would say definitely consider all of your options, including the mortgage. And even if you buy as a cash buyer, you can still do a post-finance mortgage in 6 months after buying, and that's an absolutely normal mortgage. So it enables you to position yourself as a cash buyer to be in a better position to negotiate, and then put the mortgage on the property in 6 months. After those 6 months have gone, it's not possible to put the mortgage on the property. So I hope that answered the question. It's a bit of a complex one and obviously individual to everybody's situation.
That's very interesting. Thanks, Sharon. I hadn't thought about you could buy with cash and then take a mortgage out so soon. And also, I think a lot of people don't realise that equity release isn't available in France. So it's just another sort of lesson in not presuming that things are going to be the same as your own country. Okay, lovely. Let's move on to a question now around healthcare for Paulette. What do I need to do to tick the healthcare insurance box when applying for a long stay visa?
Okay, so if we're looking at a case where you do need to have a health insurance policy to accompany your visa application, there are a few criteria that you need to make sure the policy covers. It needs to cover the whole duration of the visa application. So if you're applying for a 12-month visa, you need to make sure that that policy is going to cover you for the whole 12 months. It also needs to cover a minimum of 30,000 euros for medical expenses. It must include emergency repatriation and evacuation. And it also needs to cover what's called from the first euro. So a policy can have an excess or a deductible, but the policy must start from the first cost of treatment. So even if there's a 50 euro excess or deductible, for example, it will still kick in once you've spent €1 on healthcare cover, but you still pay the first 50 euros of it, but it still kicks in at that €1. Something to be really careful of is some people will use an annual travel insurance and think, okay, it's a 12-month policy that will cover me. It won't. An annual travel insurance policy generally has a restriction of a maximum stay of 90 days, and then you need to go back and you can come back on holiday for another 90 days. So that doesn't actually tick the box for the whole duration of the stay, and it will put you at risk of having your visa declined for that reason. So the visa compliant health insurance policies that we issue cover all of they put basically a tick in all the boxes for the criteria, and there's no risk that you're not going to have your visa approved because of the health insurance that we provide.
That's great. Thanks, Paulette. Very good point not to just think you can use your normal travel insurance. The healthcare insurance for the visas is very specific, but people can come to you for more advice on that, can't they? Okay then. We've got now a short question with possibly a long answer for Amanda. It doesn't sound as easy as the length of it, if that makes sense. Will my UK pension be taxed in France once I move? And I wonder if, if it would be the same for other nationalities too.
Okay, so if we have a little think of, so in France, when you move to France, you then will be, you'll need to lodge any or declare any earned income, okay? And it's worldwide income that you have to declare. Now, France has got different double taxation treaties in place. And it might be that, let's say, for example, that you were a teacher and you receive a teacher's pension, then what would happen is you would have to pay your taxes on that pension in the UK, but what you'll be given the details of how much tax you've paid in this certificate every year, and then on your French tax return you will say that you've had this pension, where it's come from, that you've already paid so much tax already, and then France will take that into consideration. So you're not going to be paying twice, but if France feels that you need to pay a little bit more here, then obviously it will. But the thing that I think is very important here in France is, and it comes under the pension income, is if people move to France and they take their 25% commencement lump sum, then that's slightly treated differently again, and it depends whether you take the whole pot, okay, and you don't leave any benefit behind, so you can't then take another income next year. If that's the case, then you need to get permission from your local tax office. So you would email them to say, I'm taking a lump sum, can you tell me what my tax rate will be on that, and then they will reply and see whether you'll be eligible for a very low rate of 7.5% plus, if applicable, social charges. So under the pension you've got the income which you'll need to declare, and then if you take any lump sums, whether they're the pension commencement lump sum, although that might be tax-free in the UK, then you've still got to pay some taxes here. Does that help?
It sounded very comprehensive. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so a question now for Jonathan on foreign exchange. We're buying a property and are worried about transferring the final amount to the notaire. It's such a large chunk of our savings. What's the safest way to transfer it? We won't have a French bank account at the time of completion, and I can certainly understand people's worries. It is a large amount of money for even if you're buying a bargain French property.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of points to this one, Karen. I think just on the topic of security and sort of safety of funds, it's worth pointing out Lumon's regulated in the UK by the Financial Conduct Authority, and that covers us for much of the rest of the world. And then in the EU, so of course covering France, regulated by the Bank of Ireland, which allows us to handle transactions there. And the key point is we operate what are known as segregated bank accounts, sometimes called safeguarded funds. So any funds that are being held are held in a special client account, much like a solicitor or a notaire, and that's how money is handled. So funds are sort of secure and safeguarded in that manner. And of course, you want that transfer to be a safe process to the notaire. So with Lumon, you have these client accounts and you have a Euro client account as soon as you're registered. So even if you haven't opened a French bank account yet, and that's actually an important part of this, a lot of French banks will require to actually own a property before you can open a French bank, which can cause, of course, some problems there, because it's the chicken and the egg, really. So Lumon, you get a Euro account when you're registering, not your actual own bank account, but access to this Euro client account that you can use to pay the notaire. Last year, I think we dealt with about 750 different French notaires. We also know a lot of the paperwork that the notaires can ask for in terms of proof of funding, we can get any extra bits of paperwork that are needed like that to allow those payments to go through smoothly. Just to point out, on the French banking side, we do have some connections in France to help you open a French bank. Actually, at the earliest stage, Joanna mentioned the compromis de vente, that's the initial sales contract. We're now talking about the final point, the acte de vente. But with a banking partner we have, you can actually open a bank account at the compromis de vente early on, so you can get all your banking arrangements sort of sorted out very much earlier in the process, rather than having to deal with it at completion, when of course you're going to have lots of other things to do. And also with the French banks, a bit like any bank all over the world, if you've got a large amount in there and then you were trying to transfer it to the notaire, you might have to pop into a branch potentially, or there could be extra security checks. So there can be extra processes there. With Lumon, it's a very smooth transaction. We'll make it very clear to you what we need to do, but we can transfer, everything very quickly. It's usually a same-day payment, or certainly within 24 hours to get the money there. So yeah, very happy if anyone wanted to discuss that in a bit more detail, those arrangements, because you're absolutely right, Karen. Safety of funds extremely important, and knowing that your money's going to get there safely and on time can be very reassuring.
Thanks, Jonathan. So another buying question now for Joanna. We've been holidaying in France and looking online at properties for as long as I can remember, but we're now ready to start viewing properties. Do you have any tips for getting the most out of viewing trips? That's a very exciting stage to be at.
Yes, of course. And yeah, I presume with the holidaying that you have researched and done your recce trip, so you know the location or the area that you want to be in. I would say with us, we have an internal sales support team. So you can speak to one person in our sales support team, because you may be looking at maybe 5 or 6 properties on your trip, and we might have different agents that look after the mandate for that property. But our sales support team they know the distances between the properties, they know the distances between the towns, they can help you set up an itinerary, they can book all of the appointments for you, and so that you don't have to worry about how far is it going to take me from there to there. They'll plan the trip for you and arrange with all of the agents. I would always suggest that you speak with the agent before particularly if you're not in France and you're flying to France from the USA or from England or from anywhere else in the world, and have a good chat with the agent about the property, because the photographs will show you what the property looks like, and we're extremely transparent with our photographs, but they might be able to give you other information, or you might have other questions that might save you a trip to a property if it's not quite suitable. So it's always good to have a chat with the agent before you come over. Then I would always suggest that, say you were on a week's worth of visits, that you leave a couple of days, or at least one day, free, because you might want to go back for second visits, or you might actually really love a property, but you're not that sure about the area. And it's always good to go and spend some time, have a look around the town, have a look around the market, what's going on in the town, what's available, have a chat with some of the locals, pop into a bar and or a restaurant, and it will have a chat about the people that actually live there. But if you block it all out with appointments after appointments, firstly, everything will become one, and all the houses you'll get confused. So always take your camera and take some photographs when you're viewing, so that you don't. Make notes on every property that you see, because when you've seen a few, you'll forget what was in there. And I would definitely say try to not see more than 3, 4 at the maximum, but maybe 3 properties in one day, because you do need the space to have a look around and check out the vicinity. And I would definitely have a day off to think about things, or go back for second visits. That would be my my major tips.
That's great advice. Thanks, Joanna. I think it can be very easy to underestimate how much time it takes, one, to look at properties, but also to get from property to property in France. Obviously, the Legget agents will advise you and will make sure that you're not cramming too much into your schedule, but saving a few days back, fantastic advice. You just really will want to soak up the atmosphere of a place and make sure that it is what you're looking for, as well as go back for second viewings. So fantastic. Good luck with your viewing trips. It sounds brilliant. So let's move on to a question for Tracy now. When I move to France, will I have to change my UK driving licence for a French one? If so, how do I go about this?
So yeah, for your driving licenses, the short answer would be yes, of course you would, because as a British driving license holder, it's non-European. And thanks to the Brexit negotiations, it is reciprocal, so you can exchange it. The one thing I would say is, as part of the Brexit negotiations, they did say that anybody who has a British passport that was issued before the end of the transition period, you don't have to exchange it until 6 months before it expires. So what does that mean? It really means if you move into France now and your driving license was issued before the 1st of January 2021, then you can keep it until it expires. Well, 6 months before it expires, because the process takes quite a long time. But if it was issued afterwards, because, you know, change of address, or you've had to renew it in the UK, then once you come to France, you have to exchange that within the first year. So if you're on your first year of your visa, that needs to be exchanged before the renewal process starts, and that starts in month 8 of living in France. So usually around about the 6 month or 7 month mark of living in France, you would exchange that online via the ANTS website. It's ANTS, which is the online platform for exchanging driving licenses, plus other processes as well. The process itself is quite long, much like many processes in France, unfortunately, but particularly the driving license exchanges have seen a big delay. So the actual submission is relatively straightforward, but the process itself to get your driving license can take anything from 6 to 8 months at the moment. Hence why you should start that exchange process at least 6 months before the expiry date of your current driving license, if you don't have to do it in your first year, that is, of course. So yes, it really depends. Check out your actual current driving license to see when it was issued, and with a bit of luck, you might fall into the category of not having to exchange it in the first year.
Absolutely, that sounds a bit of a result if you find out you don't have to exchange it. It's one less thing to do straight away. But if you, yeah, obviously check the dates. Okay, thanks, Tracy. A question for Sharon now. What documents do I need to provide for a French mortgage application? I'm sure I read somewhere that lenders require you to give loads of information.
Very good question. Thank you, Sharon. Yes, they will basically require your life story and documentation. The reason French lenders ask for so many documents is we do not have any credit reports such as Experian, Equifax, etc. And the lenders here have to abide to very strict regulations in terms of lending capacity and making sure that people can afford the mortgage. And the only way that they can do that, because they can't check up on you on some like general database, is to build up a full financial picture and verify all of your information themselves. So they're going to ask for documentary evidence of your income, so things like tax returns, salary slips. If you own your own company, your company accounts. They will also ask you for all of your bank statements, the last 3 months bank statements. Some lenders might ask for 12 months bank statements, because then they go through your bank statements with fine tooth comb and they follow your money. i.e., are you paying loans that you maybe haven't declared? Are you sending money to another account which you haven't provided? And they will retrace all of that, because it's their responsibility to make sure that the mortgage is affordable for you. They will also ask to see where the origin of your down payment is coming from, i.e. your personal contribution. How did you get that money? Where did it come from? Did it come from another loan? And they will make sure that there is a coherence between all of your financial situation. So yes, they do ask for a lot of paperwork. It's not because they're curious, it's because they actually have a legal responsibility. Otherwise they can't give you the mortgage. So if a bank asks you for paperwork, there's a reason behind it, and it's not just because they want to spend hours going through your personal life and whatnot. So you do need some patience, and if you prepare things properly in advance, it's actually quite an easy process. you put all of the mortgage application. I never send an application to the bank if I don't have all of the documents, because if we start going into like a ping pong session of asking for more documents, then an application is going to take longer. So preparation is key and patience is necessary. But yeah, lots of paperwork, so good luck.
That sounds good advice for everything to do with moving to France and buying a French property. Preparation is key. And what was the second bit? And I can't remember what you said now. It was very good.
Patience.
Lots of patience, that's it. Lots of patience. I've got a memory like a sieve. Right, so let's move on to a question for Paulette now about healthcare. The question is, how am I covered for healthcare after I arrive in France and after I join the French healthcare system? So are they two different things?
Yeah, they're really two different things. When you first arrive in France, that's going to depend if you've had to apply for a health insurance policy to accompany your visa application. That's obviously going to give you cover depending on what level of cover you took, from basic, from accident and emergency, or a more comprehensive cover. If you're arriving from, say, another EU country or from the UK with an S1, so if you're eligible for an S1 from the UK, you're not necessarily, well, you're not going to have that visa health insurance policy. Now, you can take a standalone policy which will cover you for that accident and emergency in your first few weeks and months while you're making your application for your French social security number. Now, bear in mind that application is going to take several weeks, if not several months. So yeah, Tracy's nodding. It's not a quick process. So, you know, you think, oh, I'm healthy, I'm okay. You know, 6-7 months can actually be quite a long time if something drastic does happen. Now, say for example, during that time you have, I don't know, tonsillitis or an ear infection or something, you know, not necessarily that you need to go to hospital. It's not classed as accident and emergency and things like that. It's going to cost you €30 to go and see the doctor. You can go and see the doctor. You don't have to be registered with the doctor. You can find a doctor in France and go and visit the doctor, and you just pay €30. Once you've been in France, once you've started that process to get your French social security number, once that comes through, that's where we're going to swap you to what's called a mutual top-up policy. And the mutual top-up policy is going to work with your French social security number, and it's going to top up the difference of what social security have refunded you and what the actual treatment cost, depending on the different levels. And I think there's about 35 different levels of cover just with AXA alone. You know, there's so many different levels. So at that point, you need to have a good talk with somebody who's quite knowledgeable, who's going to go through your needs, your budget, and find something that matches that. I would say for somebody first moving to France, if you have a repeat prescription, for example, in the country that you're coming from, maybe see if you can stock up a little bit on that medication. You can go to a doctor here and get a prescription to get that medication once you're here, but just makes your first few weeks here a little bit easier if you come with a little bit of a stock. So yeah, just prepare. I think that's going to be the theme of tonight is prepare before you arrive.
That's great advice. Thanks, Paulette. Okay, we have a tax question that's come in for Amanda now. I'll be running a business when we move to France. Are there different tax regimes? And if so, how will I know which one to choose?
Ooh, that is a good question. This one, there's a lot of, depending on lots of different variables. Okay, so you can, when you come to France and you're working with someone like Tracy, Tracy will, if you want your particular visas, I'm correcting this on Tracy, that you'll need to be looking at what your business is going to be. So we need to know what your turnover is, what sort of income you're going to take from it, what sort of expenses you anticipate. And then depending on what those variables are, it depends whether maybe you set yourself up as a limited company, or maybe you start off as what they call a micro entrepreneur. And there's so many different types. So you know, I can't say which is the best one for you, but when you work with somebody like Tracy, she will work out, based on everything, which is best for your particular visa, because you do a business. Tracy sat next to me, so that's why I'm looking at her. You can help with the business plan and so forth. So it's a bit of a question for both of us, really. And then depending on which business regime you go down, it then depends on what you can offset. But you'll be guaranteed there'll be some tax to pay. So, that's a good point, isn't it?
Right, thanks, Amanda. And it is lovely having all our France-based panelists in one room together, even if they look as if they're all in separate rooms. They're all together. They've been working on an exciting project, which I'm sure you'll hear more about later. So let's move on to a question for Jonathan now. This question's come in. It says, we realise that there can be significant currency rate changes between offering on a property and completing on it. How can we protect ourselves if the rate moves in the wrong direction for us?
Oh, thank you, Karen. And maybe I can join the French-based team on the next webinar. That would be a good one. So we had a bit of sunshine here in London today, so I'm not too jealous. But based on the weather so far this year, I'd certainly rather have been there. So I hope you're all having fun. So looking at this, what are the different ways to mitigate the rate going the wrong way? I mentioned before the Euro wallet. So the first step with Lumon is to register totally free of charge and get immediate access to this Euro bank account that you can use, a client account. So one of the ways you can protect yourself if rates are moving against you is to outright purchase your euros, and then you can just hold them there and then transfer over to France when it needs to be sent. You probably won't get the immediate completion date until sometimes just a few weeks before the completion. You'll have a rough idea, but just because you don't have the completion date and maybe even the final bill from the notaire just yet, some clients do find it quite comforting just to know they've purchased their euros. It's all here in the Euro accounts ready to go, so that once they do get that data and information, they can move quickly. And as you say, Karen, there's no risk of the rates moving against them and making things more expensive. The other option is called the forward contract. Now, this is a really useful tool. It allows you to fix the currency rates for purchase in the future. So lock in today's rates for payment in the future. It's a bit like a buy now, pay later deal you might get for a sofa or a TV or a kitchen, 0% interest free, that type of thing. You buy your currency now, you do have to pay something now. It's 5% deposit. That can be moved around a bit according to circumstance, but typically a 5 or 10%. So this would be used, say, for someone, say you were selling a property in America or the UK, and you're going to close in the next month, say in the UK or the US, selling a property, and then you've got a property deal to complete on in France in 2 months' time. Well, look, you don't obviously have the cash yet from those property sales, but you could use the forward contract to still lock in the rate so that once you do get those funds in a month's time, you know today what it's going to be worth. And the question mentioned, what do I do if the rates are going the wrong way? Actually, you can use these mechanisms, these two options to lock in rates if the rate goes in your favor. And that's just what's happened lately. Buying 250,000 euros just this month with pounds has become about £4,000 less. Think what you could do with that with your new home over there. And with dollars, it's even more impressive. 250,000 euros is $8,000 less. So it just shows you how much these currency fluctuations can really impact the value of your purchase. So at the moment, rates are in the favor of buying euros. Global events recently, of course, whilst unfortunate events, what it's done is it's caused the euro to become a little bit weaker and the dollar and pound to rise because they think interest rates could go up in the UK or the US. But yes, the point is markets moved in favor for buying euros, but that could change very quickly. And actually at the beginning of the year, a lot of the forecasts for the pound and the dollar, the general sort of consensus was both currencies were going to get a bit weaker. So just all of this really underlines the value of understanding your costs nice and early in the process. It's peace of mind, it's certainty, and it just means what's supposed to be a lovely, exciting time buying your overseas property and planning some lovely times in France isn't going to be ruined by something unexpected causing the rate to move against you. You know, those numbers I gave you, that could be the other way, and you'd have to find an extra £5,000 or $10,000 for that same purchase. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think that's a nice simple way to understand the forward contracts, so buy now, pay later. It's a good way to describe it. Okay, then let's move on to another buying question for Joanna. This one that's come in says, we've seen a few properties online that we liked, but when we contacted the various agents in France, they wouldn't let us know where the properties were. Is this normal?
Yes, it is. It is quite normal. I mean, they can give you an idea of where the property is. There's quite a lot of reasons for that. A lot of properties might be holiday homes, or they might be inheritance where somebody's not living there, and you know, but the furniture and everything's in. And in a lot of those cases, the vendors don't want us to give the addresses out. They're worried about, you know, it might be an isolated property, or it might be in the countryside somewhere. Might not be any neighbours, and they don't like us giving the address out. There's also the thing in France where when you mandate a property, it may be on with several agents, or maybe perhaps just one or two. But what happens is when the address is given out, the vendors tend to get a lot of agencies knocking on the door, and they don't like that. So that's another reason why they don't like giving out the addresses. And bearing in mind, you know, with the French, a lot of the French don't actually use an agency. I mean, I'm not saying it because I am an agent, but I'd always recommend using an agent if you're buying abroad and you don't know the French system. But the French do, so they sometimes do go direct. But we're always happy, you know, you can sign a bond of visit, or, you know, as long as we know who you are, and we can sort of give out those addresses. But generally speaking, we accompany every visit, so we don't and also in France with every agency, they don't do unaccompanied visits like they do in other countries where, for example, in the UK, a lot of the time you can go and visit the vendor directly, but that doesn't really happen in France. But yeah, I mean, I would always, you know, have a chat with you, show you the area. I mean, realistically, with our own properties, we do put where the town is. We sometimes we've got aerial views, sometimes we've got drone views. You know, we'll say exactly where it is, but there is occasions where, you know, people might have expensive art and they don't want to give the address out, you know, because they've got things in the building that they're worried about. So there's lots of different reasons, but you know, there's nothing we're going to say no, you can't have the address. Of course, you can have the address, providing the vendor is happy for us to give you that.
Lovely, thanks, Joanna. As you say, once you know, people are at that point where they're going to visit the properties, you're going to accompany them, then the address obviously is made clear. But at those early stages, there's nothing sinister. It's just protecting the properties, and also the agents, of course, protecting the properties they have on their books. Okay, then. So a question for Tracy now. It says, I want to set up business in France, either a gîte complex or maybe continuing in my current career as a freelance graphic artist. Would one be easier than the other in terms of working visas? And could I swap between the two if I changed my mind?
Yeah, really good question. And I'll start by the end of it. Can you swap between the two? No, you can't. That's a very easy one to answer. You can't swap between business visas. When you get a business visa, it is for the actual activity that you have applied for. So that's very clear. But let's take a step back and look at the business visa itself. And I'll link it up to the question that Amanda had earlier on the whole tax and the business structure. So what happens generally speaking when we work with our clients, the very first thing that we'll do is have what's called a clarification meeting, and we really look at your business idea. So in this scenario, you've got two ideas, one a Jeep business and one the graphic designer. We're going to look and ask you lots of questions. We want to look at what the expected turnover will be, what the cost structure will be, so which is the best type of business structure for you, what your legal social charges will be, what your tax implication will be. So find the right structure, but also find the right business visa for you. And generally speaking, as part of the business visa process, there is a business plan and financial plan that has to go along with the work authorization. So all of this information and these documents need to be able to get the business visa for you. And if you're asking me, from my experience of 15 years of working in business and visas coming to France, the easiest option between a JIT and a graphic designer will definitely be the graphic designer. And I'll explain why. When you want to go for a JIT business, although it's absolutely doable, we've done many JIT business visas, is you have to have the property signed at first. You can't actually go for a business visa on a JIT property if you don't actually sign the final deed, because you can't have a business authorization on a property that is not actually yours. You can do that on a graphic designer, because obviously it doesn't matter where you work from in France as a graphic designer, but for a JIT business you actually have to have the property for it to be a solid business. Otherwise the visa centre will look on it as something very subjective. Until you actually have the deeds in your hand, the property, which is actually your business, is not yours. So from that perspective already it's easier, the graphic designer. Also the graphic designer is a transfer of skills and can be managed from anywhere, whereas JIT obviously is actually based upon the property. I would advise, if you're looking to do a JIT activity, and I'm sure the Legget agents can help you amazingly with this, to find the right property, maybe something that already exists or has already worked as or a JIT business. Because that adds weight to your file when it comes to a business visa, where you can show it's already been advertised or being used as a JIT activity. And also from an earnings perspective, when we're putting together the business financial plan, what you can earn through the business from a graphic designer compared to a JIT business, depending, or how many JITs you have, where it's placed, how many of the JITs are there in the vicinity, what is that turnover going to look like, so we can sell and make your business plan look better, based on what that's looking like. So I can't say at this stage which is better for you, because of course I'd have to have a sit down, dig down deep into your file and say which would work better and look better to the visa people to get that for you. So sorry, quite a big answer, but I hope that helps. It's quite complicated.
Thanks, Tracy. There's a lot of variables there, but I think that was a really good overview. Okay then, question for Paulette now. I'm buying a holiday home in southwest France. Do I need specialist house insurance, as I won't be there full time?
Okay, well done for looking at southwest France. I live in southwest France. It's brilliant. So good tick in the box there. So in terms of the home insurance, the first thing you need to do is to make sure your insurer knows that you're not always going to be there. It's not going to be your main residence. Generally, if the property is unoccupied for more than 90 days a year, and that's not per occasion, it's 90 days cumulative through the year, then it needs to have a clause put on that home insurance policy to say that you're not always there. Your policy might have clauses like between November and April, you need to empty the water system if you're not there. There may be things about you need to close the shutters if you're not at the property. Usually that's more, well, if you're not in. Some other insurers is if it's more than 24 hours. It depends on your insurer. You need to make sure that you read your policy and know what you need to do with the shutters, but generally close the shutters when you're not there anyway. It's an extra level of security. Very much consider leaving a key with somebody. If, say, for example, we had a recent quite a storm, if you've got, say, damage to your roof and suddenly water's pouring in, and you're completely oblivious. If you've got somebody local who's got a key, or even somebody who hasn't got a key, someone that you can kind of say, could you just have a little bit of a drive past the property and let me know? At least then you might need to do something about it, rather than just leaving a great big hole in your roof for several weeks before you're at the property again. So a few things to consider. And just one last thing: if when you're not there you're going to let the property as, say, Airbnb, Again, you need to let your insurer know, just again, so you've got the public liability clause in there. So if something happens, if your property causes damage or injury to someone, then you're covered, because you've added the extra clause to your property insurance, which costs probably about €60 a year. It's really not a lot to just put that public liability insurance on the property if you're going to rent it out. The key there is communicate everything you're doing with your insurer.
That's just what I was going to say. Be very transparent with your insurer. Okay, so a question for Amanda now. Very interesting one. Are there any particular tax and wealth management pitfalls to avoid when moving to France?
So the number one pitfall is to don't assume. Okay, so often you make, so for example, let's say you're in the UK and you have an investment bond and you've been taking 5% tax-free, because that's what it would be in the UK, each year as part of your income. So often people assume that that's going to still be tax-free when they move to France, and it isn't. Okay, so it's either subject to your household income tax rates, or it could be subject to a rate which is called PFU, and that's roughly 30%. So if you're expecting to not have that to be tax-free, and now you're going to get a tax bill, that is a big pitfall. It's the same with if people have got an ISA. So let's say that they're in the UK, they've got an ISA, but they haven't taken any income, so they're leaving the gain to grow. Well, that is actually going to be charged as a capital gains tax, even if you haven't taken the lid off and taken any money out from the ISA. So this is where working with a trusted and qualified and regulated financial advisor, they can look at what you have and make those tax efficient here in France.
Thanks, Amanda. And then that's across the board, you know, seek advice on all these areas to make sure that you do avoid those pitfalls, because it's not a great situation if you discover the pitfall and actually having the pitfall. Yes, yes, exactly. So thanks, Amanda. I think we've got time for still got time for another question. One for Jonathan. What's the best way to make regular payments on our French holiday home, such as the mortgage, bills, and so on? Should we transfer a larger amount of money over once or twice a year, or make smaller monthly payments from our UK to our French bank account?
Excellent. Yes, well, there's a number of different ways you can manage this, Karen. We have an automated system called a regular payment plan, where you literally set up a sort of direct debit standing order to Lumon, and then we automatically convert into euro once that comes in, and it goes straight to your French bank account. So that's a very handy way to keep a float going over there, so you don't have to think about it each month. You know, you're always going to have money coming in. It really comes down to the client. I mean, we've got an online transfer service where you can just log in online and do it all yourself when you want to. We'll always have a telephone-based service. I've been here 16 years. Some of our traders have been here 20 years. So we can give clients an overview of the market and what's happening. And, you know, we get some clients, they maybe build up a few months worth of living costs in pounds, and then they really try and time the market carefully just to get that extra little bit, you know, allow a bit more for a few extra bottles of wine for that month. So we'll give you as much information in the market as we can. Unfortunately, no one knows exactly what the rates are going to do next, but we certainly try and keep clients updated with what's happening. And as I say, we've had a little bit of an improvement lately. So if you've been holding off, you may have purchased at that moment. If the rates dropped a little bit, you may hold off and just wait for it to come back. So there's lots of different ways really you can manage that, and we can explain all of those different options to people. You can also use the Lumon wallets that I've referred to, the Euro account, to make some of these payments for yourself. So if you're paying maybe, I don't know, school fees or something like that, you know, you can just pay that. You can do half to your French bank, half to school to pay the fees. So there's lots of different ways you can manage all these important but sometimes a little bit tricky to manage payments, and yeah, be very happy to explain that to anyone who wants more information.
Thank you, Jonathan. So we're drawing to a close for today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. The next one will be on the 15th of April, which you'll receive details about that, about how to register for it by email. And you'll also receive a recording of this webinar, which is really handy if you want to listen to any bits again or if you missed anything. Apologies if we didn't have time to get to your question, but you can contact any of the panelists anytime and they'll be happy to help you with any further questions. All their details are on the screen, so please don't hesitate to get in touch with them. So thank you for joining us. I'll just hand over to the panelists to say their farewells. So Joanna?
Yes, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And then, as Karen says, if you do have any questions that didn't get answered, you can drop, if it's particularly to do with the agents or buying process or anything, do drop me an email. I'd be happy to help you. And I look forward to seeing you again on the 15th, if you can join us again then. Thank you. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks, Joanna. And Tracy?
Yes, it's been great answering all of your questions this evening. And again, if you have anything that you haven't had answered, reach out to us by email. You've got the whole panel here this evening. We're here to help you with those first steps for moving, living or creating a business in France, and look forward to answering any more questions you have.
Thanks, Tracy. And Sharon?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everybody, for coming and asking your questions and listening to us this evening. It's an absolute pleasure to help and to assist in helping you make your dream of owning a property in France come true. If you are considering purchasing a property and require mortgage finance, do get in touch early on in the process before you start to visit properties, and I'd be absolutely delighted to help you. And see you next month.
Thanks, Sharon. And Paulette?
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for your questions. I appreciate the health insurance topic is enormous, and I've probably not even touched the tip of the iceberg with the responses. So don't hesitate to get in touch either through Lonimi or through AXA, AXA International. We'll be happy to help and answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Paulette. And Amanda?
Yeah, what I would say is, if you do have any questions, please get them to us in advance as well, because sometimes when you're watching a webinar, you're thinking, oh, I need to ask that question, and then I don't know, something crops up and you don't. So write those down now, and then you won't forget, and rewatch the webinar, because a lot of the information on here is really interesting. So thank you. I look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks, Amanda. And Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Karen, for hosting. Thank you to all the panelists for their insights and answering the questions. And thank you to the audience for joining us. Good luck with your plans. The currency element, of course, is very important because it determines what you're actually going to pay for the property. So just like everyone else has said, good to get in touch early, get as much information as possible, and then it'll be a nice, smooth ride to that dream property, and you can enjoy it with a big smile on your face.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thank you to everyone again for joining us. We hope to see you next time. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.